Stay with us until the end of this story because what you are about to discover will forever change your view of starred gastronomy. Night was falling over Paris when Chef Alexandre Moreau turned off the last lights of his 3 Michelin star restaurant. The streets were deserted, only the sound of his footsteps echoing on the wet cobblestones as he walked home after an exhausting evening. Alexandre had everything in life, recognition, fortune, but he was missing something, that culinary perfection he desperately sought. For years, he had been experimenting constantly, searching for that secret ingredient that would make his dishes unforgettable masterpieces. That evening, walking through the dark alleys of the 13th arrondissement, he noticed a strange smell floating in the air. A sweet smell, almost magnetic, that seemed to call him toward a small shop he had never noticed before. The storefront was dark, with no visible sign, but the half-open door let escape that intoxicating fragrance. Alexandre pushed the door, which creaked sinisterly, revealing an interior plunged in mysterious darkness. Behind the counter stood an old man with a wrinkled face, piercing eyes that seemed to read into the deepest souls. "Good evening, Mr. Chef," said the old man with an enigmatic smile. "I have been waiting for you for a long time," Alexandre startled. How could this man know his profession? They had never met before. "I sense in you this thirst for perfection, this obsession to create flavors that no one will ever forget." The old merchant went to the back shop and returned with a small vial containing a golden powder that glimmered. "Faintly, this is what you have been searching for forever, an ingredient that will transform your dishes into transcendent experiences." Alexandre examined the vial. The powder seemed alive, pulsing gently like a beating heart. "What exactly is it?" asked Alexandre, intrigued by this mysterious substance. The old man smiled again. "Some questions do not need answers, only results matter." He handed the vial to Alexandre, adding, "Use only a pinch per dish, no more, otherwise the consequences could be unpredictable." Alexandre paid without negotiating the exorbitant price demanded. Something inside him knew this powder would change his entire culinary career. The next evening, in the silent kitchens of his restaurant, Alexandre decided to test this mysterious ingredient. He prepared his signature dish, a rack of lamb with Provence herbs, and delicately added a pinch of the golden powder. Immediately, the aroma that rose from the pan was extraordinary, of a richness and complexity never equaled. Alexandre tasted his creation and was overwhelmed. By a wave of intense pleasure, his taste buds literally exploded with happiness. The taste was indescribable, a mixture of all the flavors he had always dreamed of creating, concentrated in perfect harmony. He knew he finally held his culinary holy grail, the ingredient that would make him the greatest chef of all time. The following evening, Alexandre incorporated the mysterious powder into all the dishes on his menu, eagerly awaiting the customers' reactions. From the first bites, the effect was spectacular. Customers closed their eyes with pleasure, some even cried with emotion. "Never in my life have I tasted anything so divine," exclaimed a renowned gastronomic critic. Reservations poured in. Customers returned night after night, as if magnetized by these extraordinary flavors. Within a few weeks, Alexandre's restaurant became the most coveted place in all of Paris. Celebrities, politicians, the biggest names in Parisian society fought to get a table. Alexandre was radiant. He had finally reached the absolute glory he had always sought. But strangely, he noticed that his customers seemed increasingly dependent on his cuisine. Some came 3 times a week. Others called crying if they could not get a reservation. One evening, Alexandre noticed that a regular customer had considerably lost weight since his first visit. The man ate with disturbing voracity, devouring each dish as if it were his last meal. Alexandre began to worry but quickly dismissed these thoughts. Focusing on his meteoric success, weeks passed, and the strange behaviors of his clientele multiplied. Customers fainted with pleasure, others refused to leave the restaurant even. After closing, Alexandre even discovered that a woman had sold all her jewelry to be able to afford to come dine daily. These incidents were beginning to seriously worry him. But he could not bring himself to abandon this magic ingredient. One morning, arriving at the restaurant, Alexandre found 3 customers who had spent the night in front of his door, waiting for the opening. Their eyes were bloodshot, their hands trembling. They begged him to prepare something for them, anything. "Please, chef, we need your cuisine. We can no longer live without it," whimpered one of them. Alexandre realized with horror that his customers had become completely dependent on his food. He decided to return to see the mysterious merchant too, get explanations. But when he arrived at the address, he found only a vacant lot, no trace of the shop. The neighborhood residents swore there had never been a business at that location. Alexandre began to panic. He had to discover the true nature of this mysterious powder. He decided to have the ingredient analyzed by a chemist friend, hoping to finally get answers. The analysis results arrived a week later, and Alexandre almost fainted reading them. The powder contained human traces, crushed bone fragments, dehydrated spinal cord. Alexandre vomited violently, understanding the horrible truth. He had served human flesh to his customers. But the most terrifying was yet to come, as the analysis also revealed the presence of an unknown parasite. This parasite developed in the digestive system and created a physical dependence on this substance. Alexandre understood that his customers were not only psychologically dependent, they were also physically dependent. He had to immediately stop using this ingredient. But how to explain to his clientele this sudden transformation? Dear subscribers, if this story captivates you, do not hesitate to subscribe and activate the notification bell to support our channel and not miss any of our terrifying creations. Also, check the link in description to participate in our exclusive contests and win exceptional prizes that same evening. Alexandre prepared his usual dishes, but without the cursed powder. The reactions were immediate. Customers complained that the dishes had nitrogen monoxide taste. Some became aggressive, demanding that the chef serve them the real cuisine they knew. A woman threw herself at Alexandre, screaming that he had stolen her happiness. The situation was deteriorating. Customers refused to pay. Some even broke the dishes. Alexandre had to call the police to evacuate his restaurant. His reputation was ruined. In the following days, Alexandre's former customers developed terrifying withdrawal symptoms. Some were hospitalized with violent convulsions. Others fell into deep depressions. 3 people died mysteriously, their bodies no longer able to cope without this parasite. Alexandre was haunted by guilt. He had involuntarily poisoned dozens of people. He decided to permanently close his restaurant and disappear, hoping to escape the consequences of his actions. But the curse was not over, as Alexandre himself had tasted his creations. He now felt the same atrocious lack as his former customers. His body craved this substance. His hands trembled. His vision became blurred. Alexandre understood with horror that he too was infected by this parasite. He tried to resist, but the hallucinations began quickly. He saw the old man everywhere, smiling at him with malevolence. "You cannot escape what you have become," whispered the phantom voice. Alexandre desperately searched for an antidote, consulting all the doctors he knew, but no one could help him. The parasite was incurable. Once it had infected its host, it was impossible to get rid of it. Weeks passed, and Alexandre's condition deteriorated rapidly. He lost weight, his hair fell out, his skin took on a yellowish tint. One evening, unable to take it anymore, Alexandre returned to the vacant lot where the mysterious shop once stood. He frantically dug the ground with his hands, hoping to find traces of the powder. Suddenly, his fingers touched something hard, a perfectly preserved human bone. Alexandre pulled it from the ground and discovered with horror that it was a human skull. Other bones appeared, revealing a true clandestine cemetery. Alexandre understood that the old man used these remains to manufacture his cursed powder. But who were these victims, and how long had this horror been going on? Examining the bones, Alexandre noticed they bore bite marks. These people had been devoured before being buried here. Alexandre recoiled in horror, understanding that the old man was a cannibal, and now he and his customers had become involuntary accomplices to these crimes. The parasite was not just an addiction. It was a means of transforming people into predators. Alexandre felt his instincts changing. He looked at passers-by with a new, disturbing hunger. He resisted with all his strength, but the parasite was gradually taking control of his mind. One night, Alexandre woke up in the street, blood on his hands and clothes. He had no memory of what had happened, but a strange satisfaction inhabited him. His stomach was full, his hunger finally appeased for the first time in weeks. Alexandre realized with terror that he had hunted during his sleep. He ran home and turned on the television, hoping his fears were just a nightmare. But the news confirmed his fears. A man had been found dead and partially devoured. Alexandre had become what he had always fought against, a monster, a predator. The parasite had accomplished its transformation, making him a new link in this horrific chain. He understood that the old man was perhaps just a victim like him, infected long ago by this same parasite. The curse was transmitted thus from generation to generation, always creating more predators. Alexandre tried one last time to fight against his new instincts. He locked himself at home, hoping isolation would prevent him from making other victims. But the hunger was too strong, more powerful than his will. A week later, Alexandre discreetly reopened his restaurant, but this time in an isolated neighborhood. He now served only a few carefully selected customers, people no one would look for. His new cuisine used fresh ingredients, prepared with the greatest care. Customers suspected nothing, savoring these dishes of exceptional quality. Alexandre had learned to master the parasite, to use it rather than suffer it. He selected his victims carefully, never taking more than he needed. Some nights, he returned to the vacant lot to bury the remains. The clandestine cemetery grew, welcoming new victims regularly. Alexandre had become the new guardian of this horrific secret. He was already preparing his succession, looking for an ambitious young chef to whom to transmit his heritage. The cycle had to continue. The curse had to survive. One evening, a young cook full of dreams pushed open the door of Alexandre's restaurant, hoping to learn from the master. Alexandre smiled, seeing this innocence, this thirst for perfection he recognized so well. "Good evening, young man," said Alexandre with the same enigmatic smile as the old man once. "I've been waiting for you for a long time," the young chef startled. How could this man know he was looking for a mentor? "I sense in you this thirst for perfection, this obsession to create flavors that no one will ever forget." Alexandre went to his kitchen and returned with a small vial containing a golden powder that glimmered faintly. "This is what you have been searching for forever, an ingredient that will transform your dishes into transcendent experiences." The young man examined the vial. Powder seemed alive, pulsing gently like a beating heart. "What exactly is it?" asked the young chef, intrigued by this mysterious substance. Alexandre smiled again, repeating exactly the old man's words. "Some questions do not need answers. Only results matter." He handed the vial to the young man, adding, "Use only a pinch. Per dish, no more. Otherwise the consequences could be unpredictable." The young chef paid without negotiating. Something inside him knew this powder would change his entire career. Alexandre watched him leave with satisfaction. The cycle was now complete. Soon, a new restaurant would open with a new chef infected by the curse. The chain would continue, spreading through the city, then the country, then the entire world. Alexandre had accomplished his mission, transmitting the burden to a new generation. He could now retire, become a simple observer of this horrific expansion. Sometimes, late at night, Alexandre received news from his former infected customers. Some had opened their own restaurant, others had become suppliers of fresh meat. The network grew, organizing into a true secret society of cannibals. They communicated by codes, recognized each other by subtle signs. Alexandre was proud of his work. He had created much more than a simple restaurant. He had given birth to a new species of urban predators. Predators who hid in broad daylight, serving their victims to other potential victims. Society suspected nothing. Blindly savoring these forbidden delights, authorities did not understand the increase in the number of disappearances in the city. They attributed these incidents to ordinary criminality without suspecting the existence of this network. Alexandre spent his days observing the city from his window, spotting new targets. He no longer needed to hunt himself. His disciples took care of it for him. They regularly brought him fresh food in exchange for his culinary advice. Alexandre had become the patriarch of this monstrous family, a family united by hunger and the taste of blood. Each new member was carefully selected, tested, initiated. Only the most promising accessed the deepest secrets of the organization. Others remained simple consumers, ignoring the true nature of their addiction. Alexandre had created a perfect system, self-regulated and constantly expanding. A system that would survive his own death, perpetuating itself through generations. Sometimes, Alexandre wondered who had been the first, the patient zero of this epidemic. Perhaps a primitive chef who had discovered the taste of human flesh by accident, or a parasite from elsewhere seeking hosts to ensure its survival. Origin mattered little, only the continuation of the species counted. Alexandre aged, but the parasite kept him alive longer than nature intended. He had far exceeded normal age, but his body refused to die. The parasite needed its host. It preserved it at all costs. Alexandre had become immortal, condemned to eternally supervise his work. One night, walking through the silent streets, Alexandre encountered a familiar old man. It was his former supplier, the one who had given him the mysterious powder. The man had not aged a day, still the same enigmatic smile on his lips. "Good evening, Alexandre," he said with amusement. "How is your business?" Alexandre then understood that this man probably supervised dozens of similar networks, that the contamination was much vaster than he had imagined. "Your work is remarkable," continued the man, "but it is time to move to the next step." He handed Alexandre a new vial, this time containing blood-red powder. "This will accelerate the transformation, create more efficient predators." Alexandre took the vial, understanding that he was just a pawn in a much larger plan. A plan that went beyond the simple survival of a few urban cannibals. The man disappeared into the shadow, leaving Alexandre alone with his questions. Who was really pulling the strings of this global organization? What was the final goal of this progressive contamination of humanity? Alexandre returned home, the new vial clutched in his trembling hand. He knew he would use this powder, that he could not resist evolution. The next day, Alexandre summoned his most faithful disciples. He distributed the new powder to them, explaining, "How do you see it?" Within a few days, the effects were felt throughout the city. The new infected were more aggressive, more efficient in their hunt. They no longer settled for isolated victims. They now attacked entire families. The disappearances multiplied exponentially. Authorities declared a state of emergency, but it was already too late. The network had taken control of strategic points in the city. Restaurants, hospitals, schools, all were infiltrated by predators. Alexandre observed this apocalypse he had helped create. Part of him felt regret, but the parasite quickly stifled these emotions. He was no longer truly human, just a vehicle to perpetuate the parasite species. His old memories faded, replaced by the instincts of the creature. Alexandre the starred chef no longer existed, only the predator survived. A predator who had learned to cook his victims with art, an artist of death who transformed horror into gastronomic delights. The last non-infected humans fled the city, hoping to escape the massacre. But the parasite spores were already spreading in the atmosphere. Soon, the entire region would be contaminated, then the whole country. Alexandre smiled, thinking of this inexorable expansion. Humanity would disappear, replaced by a superior species, a species that had learned the art of transforming predation into refined culture. The future archaeologists of this new species might one day discover Alexandre's story. The story of the chef who revolutionized world gastronomy, the one who transformed the act of eating into a sacred ritual of survival. Alexandre closed his eyes, savoring this final victory. He had accomplished much more than he had ever dreamed. He had become immortal, not through his dishes, but through the transformation he had initiated. Its name would be forgotten, but his legacy would endure forever. In 1,000 years and 10,000 years, his spiritual descendants would continue to hunt, to transform their prey into culinary works of art. Alexandre had created eternity, an eternity of hunger and pleasure, an eternity where survival had become a refined art. And somewhere in the shadow, the mysterious old man smiled. 'Cause Alexandre was only the first of a long series. Soon, other chefs, other artists, other creators would be chosen, each contributing to the expansion of this new reality, a reality where humanity had finally found its true nature, that of supreme predators, masters of their environment. Alexandre opened his eyes one last time, looking at his transformed city, a city where every restaurant had become a temple of the new religion based on the consumption of the inferior species. Alexandre smiled. His work was accomplished. The era of humanity was over. That of the true gourmets had just begun. And in this new era, Alexandre would forever be recognized as the founding father, the chef who had opened the path toward absolute culinary perfection, a perfection that had only one secret ingredient: humanity itself.